Morning.
Great to have you. You've had 10 straight quarters of double-digit user growth. Most recently, 631 million global active monthly users. That's pretty good. How is the consumer seeming right now between Iran, tariffs, gas prices? Like, what are you seeing?
There's just a little bit going on in the world, right?
Just a little.
It's interesting. Like, obviously, no comments on current quarter, all those sort of disclaimers as a public company.
Check.
But we've talked about this on our last earnings call and pretty consistently that there's been real resilience amongst consumers. And I think not only has there been resilience, I think it's also there's so much changing in terms of the landscape with AI and all these kinds of things. Consumers, I think, interestingly, are craving authenticity and meaning and purpose and all these things that are not really answered by AI. And so I think that's something that we're really paying close attention to is that, I'm an entrepreneur by background, an engineer, a technologist, and there's so many great uses of AI, but there's also a bit of a sort of counter movement to that with consumers of, as so much is changing, what do they reach for to sort of have ballast in the ship, to sort of hold on to in terms of like where they find trust or meaning or purpose in these things. But from a shopping perspective, of those 630 million users, more than half the platform's Gen Z. So Gen Z is our largest, fastest growing demographic. And more than half of our users are there to shop. And so we've seen that shopping activity, particularly in a visual-first, AI-driven world, there's tremendous engagement.
So let's come back to AI, of course. But you have this incredibly intentful, purposeful, excited, passionate user base. But you've said yourself, we have more work to do to ensure monetization more fully reflects the strength of that user activity. So what's holding the company back on monetization?
Well, I wouldn't say there's something holding us back. I mean, I came in as CEO 4 years ago, and the purpose was twofold. One, we wanted to prove there was a more positive business model for social media, that you didn't have to use engagement via enragement to sort of keep people glued to a screen, but you could actually try to build a more positive space, one that would leave people feeling better, and one that would leave people feeling better about their time spent, that it wasn't just about maximizing time spent, but about maximizing time well spent. And then the other side of that was building it out as a shopping platform. And over the last 4 years, we're now 80 billion plus searches per month, which is just a massive amount of search volume. Those searches are primarily visual, so proving out a new way to search. More than half of those are commercial. And as is true with any platform, you want to get the users and the engagement first, and then the monetization follows behind that. But we've also 5x the number of clicks to advertisers over the last 3 years. So the ad platform has been growing, very nicely. We quadrupled the growth rate of the revenue, and so it is following. But of course, you want to get the user engagement first, and the revenue follows in behind that.
Is part of it just the way advertisers measure success? I recently read in MediaStack, one of your executives said 95% of Pinterest impact is invisible to advertisers who look at last click data. Is that a problem, that advertisers are looking at the wrong thing?
Well, I think that's not just about us. I think that's been a big breakthrough in advertising generally. It's one of those things, not all that matters is measured, and not all that is measured is what matters. And great CMOs have always known this, that even though the last click was the thing that was the most measurable, any great CMO would know that, well, okay, do you really believe the whole decision was made in the last 30 seconds before that last click, or were there things before that around building your brand and your customer connection and how customers should think of you and how they were researching your product? So much of that happens before that. And just to be very fact-based about it, for most commercial journeys, they tend to be multi-day, multi-week, multi-month. And depending on how high consideration the purchase is, the longer that time period tends to be. But even something like apparel tends to be a multi-day consideration period. So if you're only measuring the last click, you've probably just found the toll booth, but you didn't find sort of actually the sort of map somebody used to navigate the journey. And that's not just about us. I think just generally that's been a major issue. But the good news is, with things like clean rooms and other privacy-preserving technology, the ability to go understand the full journey of the user is getting better and better and better, both with that and with AI-driven systems that can help you understand the multiple touch points that were on that journey. And when viewed through that lens, yes, we've 5x the number of clicks to advertisers over the last 3 years, so we're driving a tremendous amount of last click. But of those 80 billion searches a month that are happening, more than half are commercial. And it's a great moment to engage when you can meet the user in a place where they have intent but haven't yet decided what to buy. So 95% plus of our queries are unbranded. So back to like, are you a toll booth or are you actually helping drive a decision? That's a very fact-based way to measure that, of like how many of the queries actually have the brand in it already. If the brand's in it already, then they sort of made up some part of their mind. Well, 95% of our queries are unbranded, which means the user has clear commercial intent but hasn't yet decided what to buy. But I think part of this that you're touching on around measurement, not just for us, but just in the industry generally, I think it's what great CMOs have wanted for years and years. They just couldn't convince their CFO if it wasn't measurable. Well, now that more of that journey is measurable, that's letting great CMOs say, yes, brand building matters, customer connection matters, how our product is understood by the customer matters, and those things matter way before those last 10 seconds before that last click.
So I know we're getting in the nitty-gritty here, but here we are at Cannes. So how are you helping advertisers make that case? Tell us, is this Pinterest Performance Plus, or like what are the tools you're giving to help make the case?
Yeah, so we have our own AI automation suite that makes it really easy to create campaigns, connect to that high commercial intent on our platform. Pinterest Performance Plus, our AI automation suite, has cut campaign creation time in half. We're doing things like creative optimization, where great marketers, great creatives are always going to want to know that they're showing up the way they want in front of their customers. But the ability to personalize and say, okay, well, say you have like a great, kitchen appliance, that you want to show up. Well, that person is, if they're going to go spend $5,000 on a coffee maker or something, they're probably thinking about how that's going to look in their kitchen. And so when you can personalize down to a level of like not just showing them a great coffee maker, but showing them a great coffee maker that is like sitting in a kitchen like their kitchen, you're going to have better conversion rates on that, and it's going to be brand enhancing. These are the kinds of things you can do with AI-driven creative optimization that don't have to be about turning over control to a black box, but can be about how do you take your great brand architecture and then marry that with great personalization. So there's things like that we're doing. And then we've integrated with 30 plus measurement partners to sort of meet advertisers where they are around these issues of measuring the full funnel.
Is that the issue with the resistance to some of these tools? It's a black box, and some advertisers worry they're ceding control over their campaigns?
I think to some degree, yes. I think there's an interesting tension to work through, is that on the one hand, these AI-driven systems can do a really tremendous job of finding opportunities that you never could have found on your own, personalizing to levels that you couldn't have done on your own. At the same time, great marketers, of course, want to know how their brand shows up and are understandably going to want to be able to sort of track that through and see that their brand shows up in a high quality way that they feel good about, that shows up in a positive environment. We see this, one of the reasons we've put so much effort into building a more positive space. One, I just think it needs to exist in the world. As a parent, as a citizen, I think we need to demand more from our tech platforms than what we've been getting in terms of safety and what it means for our children. But it's also a good business decision, because study after study after study shows that there's better engagement and better conversion when users see products in a positive context, right? And somehow, as an industry, we got convinced over the last 20 years that you would measure you'd look at the thing that came right before your ad and the thing that came right after your ad, the 10 seconds before your ad, the 10 seconds after your ad, and as long as those were safe, we'd call it brand safe. If I had pitched you on that in sort of the TV world to say, oh, I've got this show that's like really terrible and shows all kinds of horrible stuff, but for 10 seconds before your ad and 10 seconds after your ad, that's going to be safe stuff, so go ahead and run your ad on my TV show, you'd have laughed me out of the room. but we've started to accept that. Not started to, the industry accepted that for the last 20 plus years. We want to prove, and have been proving, that actually the broader environment around that matters a lot more. And the studies are very consistent around that. And I think great marketers have always known that, so we're trying to give them tools to engage in a more positive space.
Positive the whole way, AI for positivity. Let's get into it on AI. So, how much content on Pinterest is AI generated, and do people care?
So it's interesting. We've seen this multiple times. The ability to create content has been democratized tremendously, and it's not just with AI. When we all got a computer in our pocket, and then there was a phone, that on that phone you had a camera, anybody can go create content. And consistently you've seen that as content creation has become easier, the volume of content goes up tremendously. The average quality goes down because anybody can go shoot a photo. You don't have to be a professional photographer to take a photo on your phone, including me. That'll like get half of someone's head in the shot or whatever. Anybody can take a photo. Yeah. You get way more content, but while the average quality goes down, the total volume goes up, and in the fact that everybody can create, and the distance between someone seeing something in their mind's eye and being able to go create that piece of content, the fact that that is collapsing, I think is actually bringing a lot more human creativity into the world. So our job as a platform is to not judge whether it's digitally created or AI modified, but to say, is this a high quality piece of content that's really relevant to this user? And so as a platform, we're doing a lot to make sure the quality of the content is high, that the relevancy for the user is good, and then also we're giving users agency, which I think we've led the way on this relative to other platforms in we're labeling AI generated content and giving users tools to say, show me less AI if they don't want to see AI, because there is personal taste in this. And not only is there personal taste, it varies from moment to moment. There are some moments where the AI-generated content, may appear, as something that you couldn't really do in real life. Well, sometimes that's okay, right? How many, if you, my daughter's 12. Anybody that has young kids, like this past Halloween, how many kids did you see with purple hair because of K-pop demon hunters? Well, that's digitally created content that inspired something in the real world. So there's certain times when that AI content is helping to inspire. There's other times when somebody say no, I'm actually trying to redecorate a room, and I want to see a sofa I can actually buy in that room. This is one of the things that we do is help translate between here's a piece of content that may have inspired that maybe was created with AI, but then with our visual search technology, we make it so that you can see the closest viable thing in the real world, and we're seeing that really resonating with users. But we're in this transition period where users are still trying to figure out their own tastes and preferences, and our response to this is do as much as we can to filter and sort high quality content and give the user agency so that they know when it's AI generated and they have their own controls to say, show me less if they don't want to see it.
Okay, working your way through. And then just on the back end, you've been so all in on AI. How about those bills? You got some token maxing going on, or how are you controlling your costs there?
Well, it's fortunately, because we're a very high commercial intent platform, we've actually expanded profitability over the last 3 years, even as we have dramatically increased the use of AI on our platform, because we're aligning the use of AI with high commercial intent audience and high commercial intent experiences that monetize really well. But I do think this is something that people need to pay very close attention to, because I think we've been in this mode as an industry of go, 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 don't be left out. And then now, especially you start to move to usage-based pricing, the onus is much higher on platforms to prove that there was a good ROI on that. And we've been very, as a smaller platform, relative to some of the giants, we've had to take that approach from the start. I talked about how we are able to use open source models and post-train them on our high commercial intent data. and see, not only 90% lower costs than the closed proprietary models, but also better performance because we can train it on our own data. And so I think some of these issues of how do you get the best performance, open source can do a lot there because you can post-train on your own data in ways that you can't with proprietary models, and you can get much, much lower costs on these things. But I do think we're just at the start of sort of a reckoning of what are the real costs of these AI platforms, where in some use cases it totally makes sense, and other use cases, once you start to pay the real price of those tokens, it may not.
So that's a conversation internally and keeping an eye on this kind of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. And one that we're trying to help our clients and partners with as well.
You've talked in management about the value of fast feedback loops, products and management. Could you just say what you mean by that and give an example?
So it's interesting, like I gave a talk on this in Davos in 2018 that was turned into a bit of a white paper that back then I was saying, like, okay, AI is coming. Like cloud compute, AI will be the domain in terms of like the sort of core foundational models, that AI would be created by a small number of players because it's so, so CapEx intensive. But in the same way that cloud compute, created all kinds of new businesses that couldn't have existed otherwise, and all kinds of opportunities that wouldn't have existed otherwise, that AI would do the same thing, that AI would be put in the hands of the many. And the thing that people should think about is what are the unique feedback loops in your business? AI thrives on feedback loops. And so while most companies are not going to go create their own foundational models, what every company can do is think about, how do I serve my customer? What problem am I solving for them? What makes me uniquely equipped to solve it? And then what are the feedback loops in my business that are unique to me that I can train that I can train AI on to make my business better? I think that's something that every single business can think about. You don't need computer science PhDs to do that, but everybody should be thinking about what are the feedback loops in their business, how do you tap into those, and then how do you find systems and platforms that are going to help you do that. And again, part of what we're trying to do with our platform is not only are we making that commercial intent available, we're trying to make it available in ways that help our advertisers gain a customer, not just a transaction. Part of why I was so interested in doing visual search and discovery is that more than half the human brain is wired for visual processing. You still have a lot of these things that are like very text-based, but most commercial journeys are tremendously visual. And how do people tell their brand story? How do they differentiate? How do they create connection with customers? Visual's a huge part of that, and we want to make that accessible to all the advertisers on our platform and do it in a way where not only do they gain a transaction, but we take the customers to our advertisers so that our advertisers actually gain a deeper relationship so they can start to have their own feedback loops with those customers to deepen their relationship.
Thank you, Bill. Great to have you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.